Hey everybody, Crow back again, and the whole purpose of this video is just to say that I've changed the channel name from Crow Pinball to the Crow Continuum. Not the first time I changed the channel name, but hopefully this change will be the last, because I just wanted it to be overarching what the name was referring to. When I had changed it from Crow to Crow Pinball, it was to signify that, hey, I was no longer just going to make videos on anything, I was going to do it on pinball only. But now that I want to, if you watched my last video, you know that I want to kind of expand back out again, not have to worry about gaining subs and everything. I kind of felt like I should have changed the channel name again. I wasn't sold on it at the time because I don't think it really mattered, and I was kind of brainstorming ideas on what I could change it to, and I was like, I'm only going to change it if I could think of something that I think is really good, and I think the Crow Continuum is really good. I didn't think that when I originally thought of the Crow Continuum, because it's kind of an odd word, continuum. So also, it's not the easiest word in the world to spell. So I was thinking about it, and just the definition of a continuum, it's just a series where the elements in the series aren't really too different from one another, but when you look at the ends of the whole spectrum of the series, the beginning and the end are like completely different. And I feel that kind of reflects my channel very well, because I've been making videos for a long time, really regularly since 2009, but really my first videos were posted back in 2006. And if you were to look at the very first channel that I posted on this channel with one that I've done very recently, you wouldn't even be able to tell they're from the same person. I mean, this could be true for anybody's channel, but for me as well, I just like the way it rings, because also if you look at the subject matters that I've covered on my channel in the past, I've covered, video games, pinball, Funko Pops, just things that, I covered mystery. I've done a couple videos on Mystery Science Theater, and those things don't really have anything to do with one another. But if you were to order them in terms of subject matter, yeah, you could kind of connect the dots. And there you go, it's the continuum. Also, the thing I find funny about the word continuum is just the definition isn't really lend itself to anything sci-fi. But the only times I actually hear the word continuum is in sci-fi, because when I thought of it, I thought of the Q Continuum from Star Trek. Now, I'm not the biggest Star Trek fan, but I can appreciate that. And actually, when I made the channel name change, I had a comment on my community tab from the Gamer Sleuth who said, hey, is that a Back to the Future reference? The space-time continuum? And I didn't even think about that. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. That's another science fiction reference. And it just makes me like my channel name change even more. I know it doesn't really make a difference, but I feel it was something I had to do. Now, I've been thinking of names to change the channel to for quite some time, like maybe the last week. And what I'm going to do, and I think in this video, and this is the reason why the video is going to be a little bit longer than it probably needs to be, but I just think that this will be a little bit fun. I want to go through the channel art of my channel, not from the beginning of time, because I don't have it from the beginning of time, but kind of from the time that I was still known as Crow with 4 O's and 3 exclamation points. So what you're looking at is the first channel banner art that I've ever created. Well, not the first one I've ever created, the one I have, the one that's not been erased. And as you can see, I've kind of got a picture of the corner here of the room. You can see kind of Atari in the corner. You can see Funko Pops. You can see NES game. You got the pinball machines. And I thought this was a great picture. Now, the thing I have to mention is that when you make channel art, you have to make it in a way where it can fit 3 different devices. It has to fit, obviously, a website. It has to fit a mobile device, and it has to fit a television, because a lot of smart TVs and Roku boxes and everything have YouTube apps in it, and when you pull up a channel name, or when you pull up a channel, the art that shows up for the channel is like basically full screen. And in this first example, I've got nothing above and below what the actual banner is, which works, but I kind of felt like hey, you know, maybe I should put something there. So let's move on to the second one. Hey, look, I've put myself in there holding a Commodore 64 and a Switch as well, other minor alterations. And I've actually edited the background a little bit to squeeze more stuff into a smaller area. And then I've kind of taken some pictures. I think these are screenshots from an intro that I made and kind of put a filter on it, so there was something above and below. When I changed to Crow Pinball, I basically took the same thing, took myself out of it, and just made a really quick change there to Crow Pinball. If you're wondering what font that is, that's Coda. So Coda was a font I used for quite a while. So moving on, this is the first major change in the background and everything. I have myself there, and I'm holding what's like a giant pinball. I've changed the kind of background above and below. The actual background there is from Pinball FX3 Star Wars table, just all pixelated and a little bit edited. And if you're curious what that ball is that I'm holding, that's actually, I have that on the topper of my Hyperball cabinet, and it's just what that is it's just a Walmart ornament. It's like an oversized Walmart ornament I bought during Christmas. It happened to be silver, and I'm holding it in a way where you can't see the knob, but it works as a pinball. And then I changed it to a screenshot of Zaccaria Pinball doing the flyover of the time machine table. I actually own a time machine, so again, that's just kind of a rushly put together thing. So let's move on. And I made this change recently. I changed the font from Coda to Hammerfat, because I think Hammerfat is my favorite font now. It's the one that was used on Atari 2600 cartridges. So I did that. I made the change to that. And if you look at the flippers on the time machine, those are actually photos of my real time machine flippers photoshopped onto the digital version that I previously had. And that's why the angles look a little bit weird on some of them, but I just thought it was better. And the main reason I did that is because I didn't like the fact that the flippers were white in the original version, because they kind of blended in with the channel name, because I wanted the channel name in white. So this kind of made the channel name stick out a little bit and made the flippers a little bit more subtle. But moving on, I've taken this picture, and this is what I was using to like brainstorm a whole bunch of different channel names. So I would take it and I would edit in a new name for the channel just to see the way it looked, and we're gonna run through those now. So the first one here I have is Crow Arcade, and since it was no longer gonna be solely pinball based, I thought I'd throw some more characters in there. The first character we got in there is the Wizard from Archon being one of my favorite games, and still to date the game with the best box art in my opinion. Next to him I've got the Peter Pepper from Burger Time being my favorite arcade game of all time. Up on the flippers I threw Sonic from Sonic Spinball, just because I thought it would be funny. And then I've got just below him the ship from one of the ships from Wipeout being one of my favorite PlayStation games and PlayStation 1 games. In fact, Wipeout was the game that I bought with the PlayStation. That game blew me away, so I kind of wanted to squeeze that in there. Then I've got one of the Battletoads in there, Battletoads being one of my favorite NES games. I don't know if it's the favorite NES games, but it's really up there. It could very well be. And then I had to throw the Intellivision Running Man in there, and it's not because I'm a super huge fan of Intellivision, but because I am excited to find out more about the Intellivision Amico. Crow Arcade in itself I thought of because, okay, if we're not focused on pinball, what's a step above that? The arcade. And Crow Arcade actually works out really well, because if you Google Crow Arcade, you're gonna see my pinball arcade videos. So from that point of view, it's almost too perfect, but I didn't want it to be reflective of the fact that, oh, I'm only gonna talk about arcade stuff, or I have my own arcade. I know it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but I just wanted to think of more stuff, be a little bit more open. So let's move on. The next one I thought of was Crow Archaic, which, again, I like the sound of it, but it's just, archaic is just something that's like old and chaotic, I think. So in that sense it works, but in another sense, I was like, it doesn't really have that great of a ring to it. I don't think it's really that memorable. Crow Akimbo. again, is something I just threw in there because it has a nice ring to it. But akimbo means either having your hands on your hips with your elbows sticking out, or just your limbs kind of sticking out, or more common that what you see is on YouTube is akimbo means dual wielding weapons. So you'll see a lot of people saying, "Oh, Kimbo, 2 guns." And in fact, there's a movie coming out later this year, I believe, with Daniel Radcliffe called Guns Akimbo. And despite the fact that I like the name, I'm not really gonna have any of that stuff on the channel, so it's pass. Moving on, I got Crow Uncoiled, and one of the reasons I thought of that was just because, I was all wound up, only gonna do pinball stuff, and now I'm just loosened up. I'll do whatever I want, so Uncoiled. Again, it was something I thought I didn't really think I'd use, but just something I'd put out there. Next up, I got Crow the Gray, and I was thinking of, at the time, because I'm getting the gray hair or whatever, and I was thinking of Gandalf the Gray. And I know gray can be spelled with an A or an E, but I chose the American spelling of gray for this. But that's the main reason I kind of passed on this, is the fact that gray could be spelled with an A or an E. It just depends on where you're from. So I was like, I don't want to have that kind of confusion. Let's pass. This next one, same issue, Crow Graybeard. Again, I got the gray beard, but more often than not, I think Graybeard is spelled with a name. The problem here is that, what if in the future I don't have a beard anymore? I don't know. I can't imagine myself getting rid of the beard, but I don't want to have to change the channel name just in case. So let's pass on that. Crow of War is the next one. Now, this one came up because I was looking at my games for ideas on names, and I ran across Wizard of War. And I thought to myself, I really like this game. Maybe I could do Crow of War. And I was looking at it, he's saying, hey, war's even like almost crow spelled backwards. And also what I did in this image is I took out the Battletoad and I threw in the Wizard of War sprite itself. And I was like, that's really good, but ultimately that doesn't really make sense. Like, if you just saw Crow of War, it almost sounds like war. W-A-R, and I don't know, I like it, but at the same time it's a little bit confusing too, so especially if you're not familiar with Wizard of War. So I decided to pass on that. Next up, I got Commodore Crow. I thought of this because, hey, I really like the Commodore 64, so Commodore 64, Commodore Crow. And but then you've got the Commodore VIC-20, the Commodore 128, the Commodore Amiga, and the other stuff that the Commodore organization has done. And then I thought, you know what, if I did this, maybe people would think I was a Commodore only channel, so maybe not. Also, a Commodore is rank in the Navy. It also means a couple other things, mostly to seafaring vessels, people in charge of seafaring vessels. And I was in the Air Force. I was never in the Navy, so I decided to pass on that entirely. The next one is actually really good. Crow's Nest. My wife actually thought of this one, and I liked it, and other people really liked it. The problem is, it's too good of a name, because there are already 2 YouTube channels with this name, Crow's Nest and The Crow's Nest, so that's just completely out of the question. And then I've got here Crow Cavalcade. A cavalcade just meaning like, oh, here's a bunch of series of things, like a cavalcade of videos, and that works. Really, it really does work, and it's got kind of a nice ring to it. But the thing is, though, I just don't like the word cavalcade, so pass. Next up, I thought of Crow Cosmos, because it's the cosmos of videos or whatever. But then again, whenever I think of the word Cosmo, I think of things that aren't really necessarily related to anything that I'm that into. I think of Kramer from Seinfeld. Now, I like Seinfeld. I like Kramer, who turned out his full name was Cosmo Kramer. So that kind of ruins it for me. Also, I'm thinking of Cosmo, there's a McDonald's Land character named Cosmo, and there's also a Transformer named Cosmo. I just didn't like it. So pass, move on. And then I was starting to think of other kind of universe or great expanse names. So we got Crow Macrocosm. Didn't really like it. Then Crow Megacosm, which is just another term for a macrocosm. And then we got Oh, this one's kind of thrown out of the middle of nowhere here, but Crow Unchained. And the reason I thought of this is because, hey, you know, I was chained down to pinball videos. Now I'm free to do whatever I want. So Crow Unchained, but then I was starting to think of, hey, Hercules Unchained. And I'm like, nah, that really doesn't work. Let's pass on that. Going back to the Great Expanse stuff, Crow Universe. That actually kind of works, but I think that when I Googled it, there were a bunch of things that were named Crow Universe. I don't know if there's specifically a YouTube channel called that. Don't remember. But also I was starting to think of Sega CD Universe, which is another YouTube channel, and I was thinking, nah, let's get away from that. I mean, on its own, I think it works, but kind of didn't like it. And, oh, Crow Games. I put this one together despite the fact that I never intended to use it, because there were certain words I wanted to avoid using. I didn't want to use the word games. I didn't want to use gamer. I don't consider myself to be a gamer at all. I just like to play games. Does that mean I have to be a gamer? So I wanted to stay away from those kind of cliched words like retro or, you know, bits or bytes. I actually thought of Crow Bytes. I didn't make one, but because when I looked it up, there was already a Crow Bytes. I think that was a game studio or whatever. But yeah, I wanted to stay away from all that stuff. And I just made this one to remind me, if I made this video, to say that, hey, I didn't want to do any of this stuff like that. And then we come to the Crow Continuum, because I didn't really want to put the word the in front of it. But you know what? It works better with the word the. And this is the channel art that I wound up with, but then I was starting to think, you know what, I'm not really nailed down to pinball anymore, and I looked at my old channel art, and guess what, let's bring in the old channel art, because it's a wider variety of stuff. We're not focused in on a pinball table, and it's like, you know, I did this, and it needed a little bit more adjustment, so just one more adjustment. And there we go, darkened it a little bit, made the Crow Continuum stand out a little bit more, the characters stand out just a little bit more, and I stand out just a little bit more, even though it's a kind of an old photo. But there we go. That is how I wound up to change the channel to the Crow Continuum. Again, I'm curious to know if you like it or not. I like it, so it'll stick. That's why I never put out a call to say, hey, what should I change the channel name to? Do you like this or this or this? Because I feel like I had to like it 100% myself without any outside influence. And we're just gonna end the video here because, again, what I think should have been a 5-minute video has wound up being like a 15-minute video. So, see you next time.